Thank you very much. In Arabic, when you say Muhammad, it's for male. When you say Muhammada, it's for female. So I don't know why she always calls me as Muhammada, but anyway. We have a very busy day with a lot of thinking for you today. My job really is to entertain you, so I'm not going to talk about the serious stuff. I'm going to try, because Tanya started talking about trends, I'm going to talk about a trend that is normally forgotten in the internet world when you think about where the internet is going, something I call the seventh sense. But before we do that, I think we need a moment of respect, so I'd ask you to stand up for a few seconds in respect for a genius that left us last week. So Steve Jobs, over the years, has been one of the visionaries that I think, please have a seat, that I think have changed the way our world works. It is, how many of you are carrying an Apple product with you at any point in time, a laptop, an iPad, an iPod, and an iPhone? Definitely, I think what Apple has done over the years has touched quite a few of us, and I think it's revolutions like what happened in the information technology since 1984 that definitely put us in a place that is very different for us today than where our parents were. And I remember very well, I don't know, I'm sure looking at the crowds and how young you are, none of you were really interested when that one came out, 1984. That was my absolute dream. All my friends were dreaming of, fast bikes and cars and stuff, and I wanted one of those. So let me show you the ad. I'm not sure if all of you have seen this.
The first glorious anniversary of the Information Purification Directives. Created for the first time in all history a garden of pure ideology where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of a contradictory force. Unification of the laws is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
And I think they were right. So many of us of this generation would consider this to be the absolute, one of the absolute best ads that we've ever seen. And it was so inspirational for most of us. And I think, when they said the idea of 1984 won't be like 1984, I think they were right. I think 1985 was not like 1985, and 1990 was not like 1990, since that whole information technology revolution and the internet started as a result of that. Let me just take you quickly through some statistics so that you understand the magnitude. So that Macintosh was 8 megahertz and a whole 128 kbytes for you to use. My phone today has a dual core 1 gigahertz processor and 32 gigabytes, and it's a phone. You think about the internet, I don't know how many of you have lived in the dial-up days. Raise your hand, old guys. Okay, so in the dial-up days, we would dream of the 14.4 K bits per second. Can you imagine what that means? And it would go for half an hour and then fail, right? And we loved it. We absolutely loved it, right? Today I have 30 megabits per second at home, right? And I sometimes complain and whine and say, hey, that's too slow, right? Accordingly, if you remember, the very first ever two computers connecting to each other over an IP network was 1962 on ARPANET. Around 20 years later, ARPANET had 213 computers on it, right? It's only when the revolution started. How many of you have used Mosaic, by the way? Absolutely. Fantastic. We absolutely loved Mosaic, right? The very first internet browser, 16 million users on the web. Today, we believe we have more than 2 billion users on the web, and that's not counting those who come in from mobile. I'll talk about mobile in a second. This was shocking to me when I found out. In the year 2000, 75% of the world's information was in non-digital format, in tapes and books and VHS. Remember VHS? In 2007, 94% of the world's information is digital. Okay? As a matter of fact, for you to understand the magnitude, in the year 2002, we created as much digital content as humanity created until the year 2002, around 5 exabytes. This year, we're creating 1,200 exabytes of information. An exabyte is 1 billion pickup trucks full of books, all in digital format. If you think of the mobile phone, definitely a revolution that changed everything, really, because in the year 2000, those bulky phones had 500 million avid fans. It was a black screen, and it could do SMS. And in the year 2002, penetration of mobiles superseded fixed lines. 2003, they were bigger than projection TVs or total TV at the time. 2004, there were more mobiles than credit cards in the world. And 2008, there were more mobiles than radios anywhere in the world. Understand that radio is a standard on any device. So every car has a radio, every entertainment system has a radio, everything has a radio, and there are more mobiles than radios. As a matter of fact, we counted in 2011 that there will be 5.3 billion mobile device subscriptions or users in the world. Now, oops, that's 5.3 billion compared to 7 billion humans, just to put things in perspective. There is no doubt then that within the next decade, there will be more mobiles than humans. The mobile devices are available in places. So that's an interesting statistic. There is more access. People have more access to mobile devices than people have access to running water in the world, right? In India, there are more mobile phones than toilets, believe it or not. More interestingly is that the trend continues. So 490,000 babies are born around the world. 550,000 androids are activated every single day. It is said that the total smart device activation will reach a million devices a day. So you can see where the trend is going. Google has more than 1 billion users who ask us more than 4 billion questions. And 15%, this is very interesting, 15% of all questions we are asked every day are new. Questions that we've never heard of before, queries that are entered into our search box for the very first time. YouTube is amazing. We're going to talk a lot about YouTube today with 2 days of video, 48 hours of video uploaded every minute to YouTube. That makes it half a video for every human on the planet every day. Okay? Imagine the volume that we're talking about. And if you go back to where we started with Steve Jobs, definitely one of the major ground-changing innovations was the iPhone in 2007. It was a milestone in the history of business when in the first weekend of the release of the iPhone, Apple sold 1 million units. When we launched G+ in a limited release and we completely stopped people from coming in the first week, we had 10 million subscribers. So everything in the internet now is in millions and billions. It is unbelievable the scale at which and the speed at which we're moving. Now, if you wanna, I could go on, right? I could go on and give you examples after examples. We actually have like an interesting 20 pages of shocking stats of the internet. I chose some to show you. But I think you get the message, right? If you take the typical technology adoption curve, the internet is almost vertical. Right? So if you compare to any technology, I'll pick TV. So if you compare TV to internet, this is how it looks like. It took the internet 15 years to reach what TV took 100 years to reach, right? And what do I mean by that, just as a message to leave you with? It means that if you blink, if you wait 1 year, you've lost around 10 years worth of development of the whole TV and broadcasting industry, right? Somehow I find that amazing when I meet with customers that don't have their online strategy completely thought out, because, yeah, it's coming. It's not coming, it's been there. It's already at the penetration levels of everything else, and it's moving at almost 10 times the speed. So what happened with people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Larry Page and Sergey Brin has completely changed the world we live in, right? And we have a tendency as humans to underestimate what else can happen, right? So you think of the world we live in today and say, what else can they do? A faster mobile phone? You know, they'll put two SIMs on the device? Yeah, how big is that? And mostly when you ask people about the internet and the trends on the internet, they'll talk about cloud computing, or they'll talk about mobility, the obvious trends that have already happened in a way. So I want you to think of it this way. I'll take another chart on the technology adoption curve. I'll take electricity, right? Electricity is an 1800s innovation. And in 1879, the light bulb was invented. Okay? And people thought that this was the absolute breakthrough. This is technology as it would never, we would have never imagined. No more kerosene to light a lamp, but you now have your light bulb from electricity out of nowhere. It was only in the year 1902, more than 23 years later, that the fan was invented. I was really impressed when I read about the vacuum cleaner in 1905, which was a huge hit, a breakthrough of technology. This was 47 kilos of weight, and women loved it. Absolutely, I think there were stronger women at the time. And I think the absolute breakthrough in terms of volumes, believe it or not, was the toaster. So 1912. And the toaster was now talking about more than 30 years since the beginning of the innovation, right? And people continued to think at the toaster age that there is nothing more you can invent. But then we went into TVs and radios and iPods and what have you, right? And it just continues. As a matter of fact, if you just look at it today, the innovation is not complete. The revolution is not complete until we find the renewable green source to be able to generate our electricity. So if you take that curve into consideration and think that the internet really started in 1995 and think about all the resources we have at hand, where do you think the internet is going? Okay? So I can tell you the normal trends, but I think a lot of people today are going to talk to you about some of them. I think this is one of the trends that are least known. I noticed it the first time when I went into the Googleplex in Mountain View, and I found a video of Sergey Brin talking about it and about how Google works. So let me show you the video.
Here you can see around the world how people are using Google, and every one of those rising dots represents probably about 20, 30 searches or something like that. And they're labeled by color right now, by language. So you can see here we are in the US, and they're all coming up red. There we are in Monterey. Hopefully I can get it right. You can see that Japan is busy at night, right there. We have Tokyo coming in Japanese. There's a lot of activity in China. There's a lot of activity in India. There's some in the Middle East, little pockets. And Europe, which is right now in the middle of the day, is going really strong with a whole wide variety of languages.
So I love Google. I'm amazed by what this company does. And when I saw this for the first time, it completely gave me goosebumps, because you can imagine all of those little sparks around the world. A human mind looking for a piece of information sends in one word or a few words and gets an answer back. And it happens billions of times, right? And every single time that spark flashes, an answer goes back. And it got me thinking around, so what, when you think about this internet that we've created today, There are no accurate statistics because it's growing too fast, but there are some assumptions that there is somewhere around 350 to 400 million websites, more than 26,000 million servers, and 35 billion devices connected to this network and working in that Spark format. So my phone becomes on the web for a second when I send that search, sends something and gets the answer back. And it's happening so frequently in a very interesting way. And you start to, I looked at this map by the Internet Mapping Project, which was a research project that was basically trying to identify all the different nodes and routers and devices on the web, and basically trying to color them by traffic and how often they use the web. And it really looks something like this, right? So you have a network that basically has devices sparking on it all over the place. And when you take that visual view of it, does it remind you of something? What's the only other machine on Earth that works the same way? Can you take a guess? Sorry? The brain. Yeah, absolutely. Which is really shocking when you think about it. The brain is exactly the same way. They say 15 to 200 billion neurons on it. Nobody really knows the real count, but that's exactly how it works, right? It flashes all over the place. And when you think about it, one of the very interesting trends of the internet is how we're trying now to give that brain senses. Because if you know about how the senses work, all the processing happens in the brain, in that little mushy cloud out there in your head. So I have here a few of the trends. I'm not going to be able to cover all of them in favor of time. A few of the trends that you see every day, but when you put them together, you start to see that seventh sense to the internet. So I'll take them one by one. I have quite a few products, but we'll take them one by one. Let's start first with how the brain processes information, okay? And you have to understand that it is extremely enormous when the world is going to develop 1,200 exabytes of information this year, how Google can process that information, not only find it, but also index it and give it back to you at a microsecond response time. But more importantly, if something happens and goes on the web at 10:04 a.m., you need to find it at 10:04:01, right? So that amazing response time and that amazing capacity is something beyond comprehension. And I think a lot of people are deceived by that simple search box. They don't see how complex it is. So I'm going to share with you a video from our engineers about some of the work they do to make Google work better.
The Google search algorithm is made up of several hundred signals that we try to put together to serve the best results for each user.
Just last year, we launched over 500 changes to our algorithm. So by some count, we change our algorithm almost every day, almost twice over.
We really analyze each potential change very deeply to try to make sure that it's the right thing for users.
The first step in improving Google search is coming up with an idea.
There are almost always a set of motivating searches, and these searches are not performing as well as we would like. Ranking engineers then come up with a hypothesis about what signal, what data could we integrate into our algorithm.
We test all these reasonable ideas through rigorous scientific testing.
The first is with raters. These are external people that have been trained to judge whether one ranking is more relevant and higher quality than another.
We show these raters side by side for queries that the engineer's experiment might be affecting. We also confirm these changes with live experiments on real users.
And we do this in something that's called a sandbox. We send a very small fraction of actual Google traffic to the sandbox. We compute lots of different metrics.
In 2010, we ran over 20,000 different experiments. All the data from the human evaluation and the live experiment are then rolled up by a search analyst.
For each project, it's usually one analyst assigned from the moment that we're talking to the engineers, trying to learn about their change. And the impact is quite small, as you see.
We then have a launch decision meeting where the leadership of the search team then looks at that data and makes a decision.
That surely we should fix.
Ultimately, the goal of the search eval analyst team is to provide an informed, data-driven decision and present an unbiased view.
Okay, so not approved, the team will understand what's happening. If our scientific testing says this is a good idea for Google users, we will launch it on Google.
So one thing you need to know about Google is that because of our founders and the way the company has evolved, and some certain sets of our values, we don't talk too much. But this is scary complex. 20,000 experiments a day. We change the product that you're using twice a day. Can you imagine that? The Google search you used this morning is different than the Google search you can use now. Is going to be different than the Google search you use tomorrow morning. Okay? Twice a day, 500 changes to the algorithm every year. Right? We don't go out and brag about that stuff. You still see that little white box that is so simple and so easy. But this is computer science at its absolute unimaginable scale when you think about it. This brain is orders of magnitude smarter than the day we launched that brain in 1998. It is definitely a totally different experience. So it's much smarter, but let's talk about the human interface side of it. So one of the favorite sites that I find for that is sight. Okay, so with the ubiquitous distribution of mobile phones, which all have cameras that are really, really high resolution, you now have eyes in the world, 5.3. I think there are 2 billion of them or something like that. But then the internet can see. So with your camera, you can see things. But also on the internet, there are millions and millions of images. As a matter of fact, I think we have more than 1 billion images indexed on Google search. But we used to search for them by relevance, by keywords, by so on and so forth. Now we search for them by image. I don't know how many of you have used this product. We're going to demo this in a while, but let me just show you the concept.
Wouldn't it be great if you could use an image to start your search on Google? Now you can with Search by Image. Whether your photo is from the web, or your last vacation. You can search places, art, and even mysterious creatures with just one picture. And to search by image even faster, use the Chrome or Firefox extension. Now, every image is a jumping off point to explore, examine, and discover. To get started, go to images.google.com and click the camera icon.
We're also going to show you a demo of goggles, which is on Android phones. I'm sure many of you have heard of this, but it's now very different. I can tell the web, what is this, right? It's really, really a very interesting experience. And for Google to do that across 10 billion images, imagine the amount of computer science that goes into this, right? The other side that is very interesting is we also can now recognize faces. I think, of course, because of privacy issues, we don't launch that on the web. But on your Picasa web album, for example, Picasa will understand who your friends are. And it will say, OK, this is Dan. I found 15 pictures of Dan. Do you want me to call him Dan every time he appears in the future? And it's amazing how that level of intelligence can go into that brain. Now, again, from a similarity point of view, understand that our eyes are only devices. Our brain really is where all the sight processing happens. I'm not going to talk about touch balance and motion awareness, but I think you're aware of that. This is a touch screen, so the internet can feel you now. Some of it is pressure sensitive, multi-touch, and of course it has an accelerometer and a gyroscope and everything. So basically this device feels everything, and there are hundreds of applications. I think we're going to demo quite a few today to show you how the internet can feel those things. Let me then talk about hearing, one of my absolute favorite new technologies. So let me show you a video.
Thanks for checking out Google Mobile app. Let me show you what this app can do. Pictures of the Golden Gate Bridge at sunset. Cool, right? Google search results just by talking into your phone. After you start Google Mobile app, just lift the iPhone to your ear, wait for the beep, and speak. How big is a giant squid? Google Mobile app uses the phone's motion to know when to start recording. And when you're done speaking, it automatically does a Google search. See? No buttons, no typing. And here's another cool feature. Search results based on your location. Say that I'm in San Francisco, and I want to see a movie. I can just say, movie show times. And Google Mobile app gives me local search results for San Francisco. Now say I'm in New York City. If I do the same search, movie show times, then I'll get search results for New York. Another way to start a voice search is simply by tapping the microphone button. 25 degrees Celsius in Fahrenheit. 77 degrees.
So this is not a demo, right? I use that all the time. I'm traveling all the time, and I actually use this to dictate, SMS messages and, emails and so on. I tend not to write long emails anyway. They're normally one line. And it does work, and it works millions of times a day. The reason we did that is because most voice recognition applications were dependent on the processing power of your phone or your PC, which is not enough to do enough iterations. So by encoding those and sending them over to the cloud where there are hundreds, as a matter of fact, thousands of servers processing your little voice query, we can actually return results that are quite impressive. Let's then talk about, I don't remember what order I have them in, language skills. So remember, the Google's mission is very straightforward. We organize the world information, and we try to make it universally accessible and useful, okay? The problem is, if there is a piece of information about the Arab Spring that is written in Arabic and you're searching in Czech, you don't get it, right? And accordingly, it's not universally accessible and useful. So our researchers have worked on language skills for the internet, which I think the most apparent of which is Google Translate, but there are quite a few. So let me show you the very simple example of Google Translate is this. This is one of my colleagues in our Russian office. She sent me an email, automated response that says, "Hi, I'm in the UK for the team meetings, so please allow delay in my response, blah, blah, blah." And she wrote it in Russian. So I basically clicked on the translate button at the top to see how accurate the translation is. And this is the result that came back. So the Russian is basically good afternoon instead of hi. I can live with that. I was out of the office and can respond with a delay. It sounds like a Russian accent, but it actually does deliver the meaning. In case of a need, call, and so on, right? Extremely impressive when you think about it. It's not perfect. It's not written like an English literature should write it, but I understand what she says. As a matter of fact, we have a product that's called Google Translate. I'm sure most of you have used it across 72 languages. I'll show you a video, but then I'll share with you a shocking statistic about it.
Hi, I'm Josh Estelle. Today I'll give you an overview of the features of Google Translate. To translate text, simply type the phrase into the input box on the home page. If you don't know the language of the text, choose Detect Language in the Language dropdown. Notice that the translation appears immediately. For short queries like this, you may see a dictionary result. You can also mouse over the translation sentences to see the original text. What if you're translating to a language you can't read? When translating to a non-Roman script, like Chinese, you'll see a Show Romanization link appear next to the result. When you click this, you'll see the translation written phonetically in Roman characters. If you're translating to English, you may see a speaker icon next to the result. Click this to hear a spoken version of the translation.
Hello, how are you?
If you want to translate from Hindi, Arabic, or Persian, you no longer need to own a special keyboard. Simply type the words as they sound in English and see them transform to the native script and translated at the same time. And to translate an entire web page, simply type the website URL in the input box and hit enter.
So we have this, as I said, across 72 languages, and we translate more than 200 million documents a day for you to understand the scale of how this is going. The most impressive part of it is that it's very, very hard to learn a language. As a human, I don't know if how many of you have learned another language. I can see all of you speaking English, but English is probably on the easier side. Most other languages have more exceptions than rules, right? So, you know, you get taught the rule and then they'll tell you, but that doesn't apply, right? And if you teach a machine how to do that in a grammatic way, it doesn't translate properly. So what we did is we included you know, technologies that basically capture, it scouts the web for translated documents by humans. So it really sees that the Great Pyramid of Giza is never translated as the Great Pyramid of Giza in Arabic. It's translated as Khufu's pyramid, right? And it learns, when it sees it enough time, it understands that this is the way people basically translate it. And accordingly, it's improving more and more. Across many Latin languages, it's actually quite reliable as a tool. So as the internet now have language skills that I would say are even better than humans because of the number of languages it talks, then let's talk about location. Once again, it's just unbelievable. When you live inside Google and you're told about all of those things every day, you know, when you're outside, sometimes you miss some of them. But that whole 3D modeling of the entire world, can you imagine what that means? You know, I don't know how many of you remember when Google Earth was launched for the first time. I think it was 2004. And we were like, whoa, is that even possible, right? Now you model it in 3D. By the way, using people that are not working for Google, they draw their own models. Right? We're now even going inside shopping malls. So we have a pilot in the US where you can see inside the world's map. We're almost getting to the point where you have a complete copy of the world in digital format, right? You know, with that idea of being aware of your location, I think there was the only part that is missing, at least from a Google point of view, was really the social awareness. And of course, YouTube is amazing as a video memory, but also as a social platform. I think we're going to talk tremendously for a lot of, we'll give you a lot of ideas about YouTube today, so I'd rather spend the time to talk to you about the +1 button. How many of you have pushed a +1 button recently? Ah, good, that's excellent. We're serving more than 20 billion of those every day, by the way. So this is how it works.
Have you ever come home to a note that made life just a little bit easier? A tip from someone you trust that helps you find the things you care about. When you have lots of options in front of you, it's easy to find yourself wishing for a bit of advice. That's why we're introducing the +1, a way for you and your friends to help each other find great things in Google search. When you click +1, you're telling your friends, your family, and the rest of the world, this is something you should check out. Since people will find your recommendations right when they're looking for them, you can +1 things you might not send an email or post an update about. And the next time you're searching, you might see +1s from your friends and contacts, both on Google Search and search ads. So picking the right coffee maker, news article, or chocolate chip cookie recipe could get a little easier. And soon you'll be able to +1 more than just search results. You'll also find the +1 button on sites across the web, making it easy to +1 pages after you visited them. The web's a big place. Sometimes it helps to have a tour guide. So if you think something's cool, +1.
So social intelligence, I think, is one area where the internet has not completely developed yet. But it's definitely a clear direction. And I think with social intelligence, you're really copying the knowledge of the wisdom of the crowds. You know, what people really like, not only what PageRank or whatever else is telling you. And it becomes really, really interesting. So I just wanted to share with you a few of the human interfaces. And I think one of the things that I find really intriguing about Google is that Many times when I meet with Larry or with Sergey or with Eric or the leadership of Google, and I would ask, so where is all of this going? And the typical answer that we get is, nobody knows. Really, it's just so amazingly overwhelming and fast. But we all know that it's a tremendous amount of fun. Okay? And it's a tremendous amount of creativity that is going into this. And I would say that, we rarely ever come out and talk to people so openly about all of this put in one place. But when you think about it, it's amazing that as those things develop from the Mac in 1984 until the place we are in today, you don't just notice it. It's just part of everyday life and you don't notice the improvement. But it's amazing what's going on. So with that, I will answer the question before you ask it, which is basically, where is all of this going? Is it going to be like Vicky in iRobot when the internet takes over the world and sends the robots to take over and kill people? We doubt that very much. I think what we're shooting for is more like the Jetsons, where you basically tell Vicky to do what you want and Vicky will do it for you. It seems to us that this is not a world that is too far away. As a matter of fact, there is around the corner the opportunity for you to basically tell the internet, hey, I'm hungry. I don't think even you need to tell it I'm hungry. If it's 1 p.m. and it knows that you like sushi and your friends have recommended a sushi place and we know where you are and we know how fast you're moving, if you're driving or you're walking inside a shopping mall or out, it might not be a bad idea to say, hey, is it time for lunch? And that becomes your search result. So with that, I think my favorite quote from Winston Churchill is, this is not the end, it's not even the beginning of the end, it's perhaps the end of the beginning. I think you have to expect quite a bit more from the internet going forward. And I have 4 minutes if you have questions, or I can give you back the 4 minutes and leave. No questions? Boring like hell? Going once, going twice. So thank you very much.